Years ago, before now, there was a people who had a consciousness about their life. And what happened was there was plenty of family members who was stricken with a sickness that eliminated them. They would have to endure the pains of war. That is, the lost people from war. Their mothers and their fathers or their grandparents would leave them for rather unnatural and natural disasters. And so, as you could imagine, and realistically in historical facts, they begin to ask questions as to why is this happening, and why isn't people living forever, and why do we die? And it hurt so many people to the point where they themselves decided that they did not want to live, because they seen the drastic despair of losing their children, losing their husbands, their wives, their families, year after year, generation after generation. And there was a branch of people from those particular groups who lived a life as vigilantes because they knew they weren't going to be here on earth for long. They knew that their life was practically expendable. During this time, it was way before the technology age we have today. It was back there in the a little before your towns and your countries became a bit civilized. This is when you had the barbarians, the Vikings, the Middle Ages, and those who stood by sharpening their blades and going into the towns or the areas or the tents and the tribes. The story goes on as this continues for year after year and creation after creation, where the questions continue to build. Why are we dying? Why are we passing away? Why do human beings only last so long? And you can imagine the emotional attachments that people had towards those who they loved. All the while, there were others who said, well, I don't give a sham. I'm going to die anyway. I'm going to live my life the best way I know how. I'm going to take, and I'm going to take, and I'm going to take. With this, you will gain an expression in multiple ways in some of your current Bibles, talking about how the devil is here to kill, steal, and destroy. I know they tell you that all the time. And they always gave you a description of the devil as to this red horn, bull-like species with red skin and a very sharp tail and sharp teeth, with a three-pronged trident. Some of them even depict the devil as that same description, but on a horse body. They don't break it down in real life history. They don't break it down in real science. They don't break it down where you can understand it. They tell you from the mythos. They tell you from the traditional nonsense of a childlike story, because a lot of them are just walking ponds or walking grown children themselves, not really sharing anything with you, but actually mind washing you, with their fear dynamic that they're used to accepting in their life. So what have happened over the years has been a thorough persuasion. The persuasion was, why are we trying to reserve what we are losing year after year through these wars, through conflict, through trying to steal resources, take resources? Every time we try to build our village and our tribe, there's always going to be a group of, you can name them anything you want to. You can call them barbarians. You can call them vigilantes. You can call them thugs. You can call them groups of people who just wanted dominance. The name goes on. And in history, they have many and multiple names, but they branch off in different groups. And some of them may be in certain cultures as well. And this was usually before the colonial days. This was usually before civilization began to settle down, or shall I say, before it began where people had the ability to at least be mentally conniving, mentally deceitful. And at that time, they started building their boats, coming up with understanding how to manipulate the horses in vast variety, put wood together, use a certain type of metal to make hammering materials, and being able to bolt the houses and boats and things together. Then, of course, they started understanding how to come up with different forms through cotton and other materials to make their clothing. Yes, I'm speaking all the way back in those days. So way before that time, the question mark was always, why are we trying to preserve this life that keeps falling away from us? And we need to preserve it as much as possible. But the persuasion came when there were more vigilantes, or you can say, in this case, barbarians, than there were those who was able to maintain their village. Then, of course, they came up with an idea where they needed to protect themselves, but through protecting themselves, many others would fall away. Of course, that's just naturally going to happen, correct? So, should you ever think that I am wrong, or should you ever think that this story is not history, take your time and listen to what I said before you judge outside of your mind. Or shall I say, you judge with your program indoctrinated mind. Because if you think about the psychology, think about the people during that time that we weren't there. I wasn't there. Even if you don't read the history books like I do, even if you don't know where I am getting my information from, close your eyes and imagine you being in that situation where you don't have your dumb technology that you have. You don't have the amenities that you have today. All you have is your villages. All you have is wood. All you have is the sharpened metal particles that you were able to mold together through circumstances, or rock, or stone. And think about the loved ones that were around you, and when they disappeared, or if they weren't able to move after getting a very severe cold that we know of today, or getting bit by a snake, and you try to roll over your mom. You go to your mom and she's laying there, and you're trying to wake her up. Mom, wake up. Mom, wake up. Mom, wake up. And she's not moving. Or rather to say, even dad goes out, he does some hunting, or he go out and he go gather something material, and he comes back to either the village or the circle of the groups of people wherever they was in at the time, whether it may have been huts, whether it might have been bended trees or branches, or whether at that time it was very thin wood before they started to become advanced year after year. There's always a beginning of something. And I'm pretty sure that the beginning would have started around there. Even if I was not there, it does nothing but make logical sense without the Black and Deckers, without the um, special tools that you have now that you can get probably at Home Depot or what's that other place? Lowe's, or the Lowe's shopping center where you can get all your tools and things from, and certain other places that people actually shop at. There's plenty much thousands of tool places that we can actually get our tools from today. I just got through making Lowe's and Home Depot probably very popular now, even more so. However, so when the child found out that the parent wasn't moving, especially the father, as to coming back and fighting the bear, and here he is bleeding to death, and he expect for the father, or she would expect for the father, to get up and move again as he normally do, but when he's not moving and the body goes cold, and here comes the other villagers or other people that are around them and say, honey, they're not going to get up, baby. They're not going to get up. Let me take you and let's go over here to auntie over here, or this family over here on this side. Let me take you in because your father's not going to wake up again. Your mom's not going to wake up again. I'm sorry, baby. You got to wipe the tears from their eyes. And what do you mean? I don't understand what you mean. That's the child. Why is my father not waking up? Why is mommy not waking up? And this is what the group of people will say. This is what they will say. Well, mommy and daddy, they're not feeling well and they're sleeping. Or they came up with ideas to say something like this, which is even more conniving. They'll say, mommy and daddy are resting, and they're resting for a very long time. And when the child gets even smarter, the child begin to ask, why is mommy and daddy sleeping for so long? I haven't seen mommy and daddy. You understand? You get how this goes? And therefore, the deception gets even thicker from those groups of people who want to make the child feel better, or the family members feel all right about the situation. And then you get to the point where, or they will get to the point where they'll begin to say, well, your mommy and daddy are sleeping in peace. They are tired. They've been very, very tired, and they are resting. They are resting in peace. Do you get the RIP here? So let's fast forward just a little bit as this continued on. And remember, you got groups of vigilantes who don't give a care about their lives. They live their life to take whatever that they want, and they know that they're going to have to pay the price with their own lives eventually through war, pillage, and destruction. But they don't care. So as time have gone on through the BCs and the CBs and the ABCs of the beginning time of creation, or you can say civilization, all right, which extends all the way back. And yes, I'm making a joke out of it because I really don't care. I'm just here to talk about a message and a lesson to give to you. But you get the idea because I know how smart you are and you can figure it out for yourself. As history goes on, and this continued again in that time, the modern ages of their time, not our time. This is way before the printing press. This is way before the Nicene Council, 325 AD. This is way before Eucharistos Christos. This is way before they start building up ideas of separating themselves and giving their description of life and death any type of title or identity. And as a matter of fact, during this time, it was a discovering phase. Because as family members would pass away, tribal, cultural people, or groups who were in certain villages would pass away, each culture or each group that was around the world or around the countries in their particular, you could say, very, very old and very, very ancient idea of life and death, they did several things with their dead, with the people who passed on. And there's various things that they have done that you have evidence today. These things you have evidence of. As a matter of fact, most of everything I'm talking about here, you have evidence of. We just choose to be ignorant because we're so indoctrinated. Because truth have been watered down for years. Truth of real history in life has been modified to control your thinking, thus to control your behavior. If history is manipulated, your behavior can be modified. If history can be manipulated, your behavior, how you act in your lifestyle today, sadly, is already modified. So some groups decided to, of course, as we know today now, but it's been a while before that happened. You would think burying their lost loved ones was the first idea that the individuals had during those days. It wasn't always like that, Neo. It was not always like that. A lot of habits that we have today, a lot of things we do today is based on our knowledge that have been compiled from our various techniques from the past. So they did things that were kind of different. Some people try to embalm or wrap up their lost loved ones in hopes that they will wake up again. And they will actually preserve the bodies quite well because they love them, or because they were special. If they were even more special, such as a king or a pharaoh or a special lady. I can't say queen or give them any high title because I don't know what type of titles that they gave them. But the common language that we know, or we could actually say that they were probably special people. So the more special that they were concerning the culture or the tribe or the village, they were wrapped up or put into special areas like bigger tombs or bigger hut-like tombs, and made sculptures of them. And you know how that goes. The lesser of the people, yes, they will still be wrapped up. They may be embalmed, but not so well preserved. And they don't get all the accolades or the appreciation as to those who were probably, most likely, maybe the leaders or the kings of that time. So you have that. Others have decided to burn their lost loved ones. So they would dig a ditch, they would take the bodies, and they would dispose of them that way. Or they would come up with some type of brick and mortar in certain areas, and they'll try to dispose of it again in that area. That was their method of doing it. There were many others who have decided to keep their fallen loved ones, to try to experiment on the body to try to figure out what went wrong. So they would keep the body and they would break it down with its elements, try to figure out the bones. And as you would know, just like what you do any type of animal, parts have to be separated. That's just what they did. There were many others who took it a little further, but hey, this is what they did. So when the body was stricken with a certain disease, or if the body was sick, of course, as you already know, they didn't have the technology to be able to create flasks, microscopes, and all the tools that are necessary in order to put these numerous diseases on a microscopic scale into a glass where they can actually look at the biology and the changes of either the skin, the cells, the molecules, the electrons, and so forth and so on, as we can do today, by being able to break them down by their very elements. So what they would do is experiment with those people who are pretty much sick or have been taken over by a certain sickness that they had no knowledge of. And oftentimes they would use some of those sicknesses on themselves to see their effects. And because of what they believed in at that time, or what they thought to be, either it was a passing on blessing to them, yes, or it was a passing on curse, depending on the culture and depending on the people themselves. So they did this because they wanted to understand how and why this person is no longer amongst the land of the living. Why is it that they've been taken by these odd occurrences, whether it may have been by a feverish struggle, or the loss of skin pigmentation, or the loss of the coloring in the pupils, snake bitten, and the poisons that the environment was able to offer. They would still do their research, and it wasn't a beautiful one, Neo. It wasn't beautiful. It was rather grotesque, and I'm not going to speak about it. Okay? And then you have another group of people who have decided to devour their dead, to eat upon that flesh, not only to give themselves a, you would say, how can I use it without being, well, we're all adults here, okay? To give them a decent reserve of food and to provide them with the means of survival, given the situation where they're at, what sort of season that they are in, and if there are other animals and other things that are available at the time. Either way it goes, they found a way to devour their dead. And most times it was usually before or the first few months are the first significant signs that that person is not going to be amongst the living any longer. So they will find a way to, yes, make a meal out of the situation. That's not Morpheus's words. That's just history. And that is before today. And now you get to one of the not so last people who had to deal with their sort of trying to figure out the fall of man. Did you hear what I just said? So what would happen is when they begin to discover that there were certain illnesses that people were able to latch onto. At that time, it wasn't called a virus. There was no such thing as a disease. For many other cultures and people, it was just called an illness or ailment. Or this person is either cursed, or in some cultures, this person is blessed. So what would happen is if a person was stricken and they were feverish, like what we don't understand today, but it was a whole lot more worse then in that day, but we call it the common cold, for example. The common cold during that time was pretty much it was an end all be all. The common cold was something that can actually put away somebody. So once you got it, it was hard to get away from. It was stronger. Your immune system wasn't so great for it. And the fever and the snuffy nose and the runny eyes and the paling of your skin, that's just the tip of the iceberg as to what would happen. Oftentimes people could not calm their fever down. Sometimes they could not warm themselves up from a chill, same as a flu. And so it would take them over and it would pretty much end their life. There are many other diseases. There are boils, There was the blackening of the skin. There was gangrene that they didn't quite understand. And they had other extra forms of illnesses, or in their time calling it ailment, that caused the group of people to shun that person out or to stay away from them. And it got so extreme where there are many people who thought it was a curse. It was a curse from the surroundings, or what we would think of a curse from the heavens, or the curse from devil. So they would keep that person out. They wouldn't socialize with that person. They would keep their distance with them until the time came where that individual would drop without even having the ability to move again. Then, of course, they will do their just diligence, albeit over time, to dispose of that particular fallen body for the sake of the stench and the smell, and include it with the fear. Because a lot of them figured if they got anywhere near that individual with whatever sickness that they've gained, that they too will end up with the curse of death, and therefore they would pass away. See, during that time, they didn't understand that the sickness or the common cold, for example, or being bit by a bee, or being allergic to your environment, or eating the wrong type of food, because you got to remember they ate all kinds of food. They didn't understand that it wasn't about death itself. It was just the condition that the person was going through, and it wasn't all that contagious besides the common cold, which had a different name during that time, but they didn't know the differences between it all. So to them, it was all about being cursed. It was all about this person being of a different kind, and they just wanted to separate themselves from it. And in all reality, they were really trying to separate themselves from death. Now, I gave you the footwork here, and if you quite do not understand, because in part 2, the second chapter of this audio is actually going to be the lesson. I made this path for you so you can have a clear understanding how it all began. And I'm going to put the I'm going to actually put the icing on the cake. But before I do that, for those of you who have a problem with learning, okay, if this is an issue for your mind because you want to go by your indoctrination, your program, and because you was born like 2 weeks ago, okay, I'm willing to actually mail you, priority mail, a t-shirt that says I am Ralph the dog. Okay, and I have a couple of hats. I'm gonna give you a hat that say that I am a proud dodo bird, and I will actually send you a tailored, signatured chair for you to sit in. Okay, first thing in the morning, if you do not understand what I've just told you in this passage. You got it? So before I end this, I'm going to have to tether this to the other lesson for something to hold on to. So when you begin to switch over to the next chapter, you will understand in this Academy of Wildmen why this audio is vital. During these phases, you have a group of people who witnessed and saw that many men were dying. And just like the groups of people that would come up to the child and try to make that child feel better about their mommy or their daddy not waking it up, it became a little bit more expanded. It became a lot more interesting. And the stories they were able to give, and also the comfort that they were able to install within the group, the people, the town, or the village, or the tribe at the particular time, became a very interesting, lucrative, and manipulatable situation. It was a situation that had no rules. No one could validate what they were talking about. No one can challenge them when they are telling you, well, this person is just sleeping in peace, little girl. Maybe one day you will meet them again, but not right now. They are sleeping, and they're going to be sleeping for a long time. Okay? And with this particular situation that we are all familiar with, there is something else that we have forgotten. Some of you know about this expression, this word, this passage, this belief system. It's called the fall of man. See, your indoctrination and your programming, or your programmed pastor, would try to tell you that the fall of man is because men were of sin. That men was doing wrong. They've fallen from the grace of God, or they have fallen from heaven, or they have fallen out of heaven, right? But in this particular time, the falling away was people who died, okay? Or you can imagine when you go into the village, whenever there was a plague, or when you have the rat plague, or a certain type of, let's just say, for example, because we are familiar with that, a twisted form of Ebola. And you got these piles of people that are, we don't have plastic, they didn't have plastic bags during that time. There was no body bags. And coming up with very, very large sheets to cover them up was rather difficult because they had to work for every item that they had. So going out there to, what do you call that? To get a sheep, or to get a carcass from an animal, to take off the fur, to cut it down, and to make it very, very flat was a very expensive thing for them to do at the time. And it was laborious. So covering up the bodies wasn't something that was in their budget, if you really want to put it that way, in modern times. So you can imagine being a child or a teenager or a growing person walking past this village or this town or this area, Bushel, and you look over the hill and you see all these people who are lying still. You can imagine the feeling, the fear, the hurt that you have within your heart, and the trepidation that you one day just might be there if you make the wrong mistake. So in this became a very, very open platform for those who wanted to make peace within the environment, to make peace with the people who were, what did I tell you, vigilantes, or you could say bandits, and to also ease those who were in town. So year to year, or you can say time after time, their ideas continuously begin to spurn within their mind. And not to go too far into myself or too far into the lesson, as you can imagine with your own logic and your own mind, from here comes the gospel, which is gossip. From here is when they come up with the story of you being able to be in peace. And the creative idea from anthropomorphic ideas of the God concept, and why you are dying, why you are living, what can you do to live better, and therefore rules and regulations, the 10 commandments that you have in your Bible, and other rules that you may have gained in other type of handwritten religious contexts from the Catholic or from the Islamic realm and other types of realm begin to expand. But that was way, way, way years later. That was years later. All right. I didn't say whether it was wrong or right. I'm saying this is what have happened. And therefore you can imagine as well. And as I have described to you, there has been some books that have been actually put together from facts that aren't really facts. What I mean is from actual other groups and other cultures put together into one based on that culture's idea, based on that group's idea, to make what you sometimes may have today, such as the Bible, made up of different type of ideas from other people's ideas and given to you to make you think it was the word of God. But it was conjured up by other groups of people to convince you that it's the word of God, because their plan, although it makes sense, is to give people, here we go again, hope, and to give people a peace of mind and a directive, and to make them feel as if they can control their life. Because one of the number one angles as well, if you really pay attention to the passage and this history, you understand? The bandits that were in time did not give a care about life nor death. Okay? So rules and regulations not only applied to the villagers, but it reached also to those who lived a wayward lifestyle. Those who didn't mind coming to the village and walking away with a couple of heads in their hands and everything else. You understand? So the whole idea of it was to make peace and to give hope. What is it that your Bible gives you today but peace and hope? What is your religions that give to you today when you sit down and you actually read it? Are you a believer, which is peace and hope? It gives you hope for a future, and it gives you peace as you are doing what? As you are falling. Because the idea was for those groups of people who came up with those comforting words during those times. In their mind, they were saying, what can we do to comfort people as they are falling? And what they mean by falling is falling down to the point where you're not getting back up. Where, of course, in our understanding today is when you're being put down 6 feet underneath the ground. Okay? Or you're descending into the earth. But they didn't descend into the earth during those times. And that was for just several groups, not for everyone. I've already gave you what they usually did with the bodies. It took time before it became so widely spread that you have to go through the morgue and you got to go through the preparations, and they got to do their, I'm not going to go shoot out their fluid thing. If that person's going to have an open casket, if they're going to have a closed casket, there's still some preparations and things they have to do in the autopsy, so forth and so on, before that body is actually put in the ground. It wasn't a published thing for every culture, and it wasn't specifically at that time. You get that? But in their mind, the fall was when you are no longer breathing. So as people over the generations, tribal, the mothers, the fathers, and the children, when they realized that death was something that was for everyone, and the fear and the war and the struggle and the hurt that came behind it, the groups of people, which I can understand, wanted to bring comfort to the family, wanted to bring comfort to that society. Again, they said, what can we do to make the fall a lot easier? What can we do to make the fall a lot lighter? What can we do to put a pillow underneath these people who is eventually going to fall? What can we do to calm down the villagers and to calm down the bandits, to keep them from, first of all, getting out of control and continuing the death, and keep the villagers from having fear of death? Once again, it's called hope. I forgot the other word. That's okay though. Y'all got it. I get that sometimes. No, it's not Alzheimer's. But it was hope and peace. Peace of mind, some hope, and a foundation that everything was going to be all right. So that right there is the basic groundwork. That right there is when you have a schematic and you're getting ready to create a building. That's your blueprint right there, with the idea of life and death. Because these things did not come out of the ground. It wasn't something that one day this strange guy with the white beard went up to the mountain and he found this book. The book can be any type of book. And it can be any type of religious book that you have, from whatever religion that you have. He didn't just find it in the mountain somewhere. It didn't come down from a lightning strike. The villagers did not go travel, or you could say the pilgrims. They didn't travel from one side of the planet to the other side of the planet, and they start digging up the ground and they found these books in the ground. No. You understand? It wasn't some alien that came from Saturn, Jupiter for stupider people, okay? Or didn't come from Neptune. They didn't drop out of the moon and say, here is your book of manual of human control. That's not what happened. Naturally, over time, that book was developed by a people that had in mind exactly what I just said. And eventually from hope start transpiring into conquest and control. Did you hear what I said? Conquest and control. From here, you have the Crusades. From here, you start getting the stories of the Nicene Council. From here, the religious ideology and control, because it became a power struggle, because it's power when you can manipulate somebody's mind. It's power when somebody is at fear of their life. It's power when an individual really don't know the differences of what God is, what life is, and that death is always going to be around them. So those particular people who were generally elders, you understand, found it to be a very interesting circle to be a part of, where it continued to expand from year to year. But of course, there were many others in different cultures and different times of that era, when slavery began to rise up, when trying to colonize certain lands, and the dominations and those of certain cultures and groups who were so eager to maintain their power. You understand? The conniving behavior began to grow even further. Whereas during this time is when you would imagine a group saying, well, my idea of life and death and control is better than yours. So you end up with the holy wars. You end up with the battles of belief system. You end up with Jerusalem. You end up with Egypt. You end up with others. And the list goes on across the entire world, where it's my idea of life and death versus yours. And so then you have those who are brandishing maybe their colors, their symbols, their idea of what they think their interpretation of God may be. And of course, the bloodshed continued. Do you get that? So in this story, which is actually his story, all right, there are many open gaps in between. I put it like that on purpose, that you can actually add into it yourself the facts that you have learned over the years. I don't have to hold your hand with this. And when you apply your necessary logic, when you apply all that was told to you, just put them right in between everything that I said, and it should make sense to you. And again, if it does not make sense to you, you don't need to be in my academy, and I will definitely send you those 3 pieces of articles that is specifically tailored for you. Now, for those who have comprehended, let's get on with the real message, and we're going to get into the meat of this study, and we're going to learn something that's going to blow your mind in our next lesson. So go ahead and click over to it, and let's get it started. That is part 2 of this nonsense.